to give an elevator pitch for the movie, you're just like, well, it's about this caretaker who can change into a succubus who sends out flying silver balls to kill people through the long halls of the mortuary. And if you cut his fingers off, they turn into flying insects and he bleeds baby food.
Welcome. You're listening to Paleo Cheese Podcast, Episode 8, Part 2, Phantasm, with special guest Jeremy Wagner.
All right, let's talk Phantasm.
All right, let's do it.
All right, directed by Don Cascarelli and also written by him. He also wrote the screenplay for Bubba Hotep, which is written by Joe Lansdale.
Which rhymes with Hansdale.
Hamsdale, yeah. That's right. You know, I was going to give a synopsis. I don't think that I will. It's just, it's a little all over the place, and the adventure is fun. I mean, you know, obviously you're going to have spoilers. Yeah. I mean, it's an old movie. It's from '79, so. But it stars Reggie Bannister and Angus Scrimm, as well as David Hasselhoff as Jody.
I knew it was coming.
No, he looks like Hasselhoff, and that's so hilarious. Yeah, so I saw this. I have no idea how old I was. I saw it a long time ago, but I do remember the trailer on TV in the 70s, and it was scary, man. Just the image of that mortuary, those hallways, and then you'd see the ball. Yeah. I don't remember too much more other than just seeing those images and being really fascinated by that. I don't have I do have a deep nostalgia associated with this movie. When I put it on, it's like this, I wouldn't call it a guilty pleasure, but it's like a feel-good movie for me. You know, it's got that 70s aesthetic. It's got that music. It's got the hair, the feathered hair and all that stuff. And it takes me back to, you know, being a kid. And so since this is your first time seeing it, Jeremiah.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you the whole initial first 10 minutes thing, like when you were watching it, and you put it on, and you're 10 minutes in.
Last week, or
I watched it this week for the first time.
Okay, wow! I'm very interested. This is cool, man. To talk to someone who just saw it for the first time.
Yeah, my wife, her reaction, she was like, "I don't even know what I just watched." You know what I mean? But I'm the guy that likes Eraserhead. So this kind of a movie. Let's just say that I'm not at all bothered by this kind. In fact, it was fun. I felt that it was fun. I didn't have that scared feeling. And I don't want to get ahead of myself with it, you know, focusing on the first 10 minutes, I guess. But for the first 10 minutes, right, it was nostalgic because, you know, the few scary movies that I watched as a kid, you know, watching Friday the 13th and stuff like that, there was always boobs and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like there was always just kind of this, it was always there. And there was always kind of this teenage love thing going on. And this one starts in a cemetery. And I'm like, that's macabre. You know, that's a weird tension. You know, on the one hand, it's like, wow, look what's happening here. And that guy was way out of his league.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. You know, the guy had like the mutton chop stash, you know, the chops, you know, and it was real scraggly. But he was hooking it up. And the thing is, at first, my first thought was, you know, this guy's hooked up fat right now. I mean, he's like really enjoying life. But then I realized not only is he going to get killed, but he's ultimately with a dude who is not, it's like it's almost like a shape-shifting thing. Like what's a phantasm, right? And so you have this crazy thing right from the beginning, and the music, man, right from the get-go. Yeah. The music is just so iconic. Mm-hmm. I absolutely loved it. And I remember we did an episode about The Visitor not long ago. And I talked about how I liked the Visitor soundtrack. Chad really loved it. He gave it a 10 stars. We don't even have that rating. He was like, we're going 10 all the way. No, he didn't really care for it. But I thought it was great. But then when I heard this, I said, this is great. Like this soundtrack. It's so good. And it went with the mood, the feel, the tone and textures, right? And I just felt that it complemented it so amazingly. And so I was right away hooked in. Right away. I was like, okay, I'm in.
You mentioned to me before that you thought that there was a similarity between Phantasm music, which is basically one song played at different tempos, but you said it was similar to The Visitor, and man, I do not see that.
It was the era. I wasn't saying the beat or anything like that, but the era, like the feel one gets when they pop that music on.
Okay,
like you can tell that person. You can tell that it's created from a certain time and space. Like when you listen to music in Blue Velvet, and it was the same thing with this. That I said, okay, I'm mentally put in 1978. Like, this is where I am. 1977, 1978. The golden year. I was born, so obviously it's dope, but like it was just a cool thing, and I could almost imagine my mom listening to that as she's pushing me out. I mean, it was a really amazing amazing thought.
The beginning of that movie where it shows the blonde haired chick, and then it shows the tall man. It's weird. I saw this movie. I've seen it like 2 or 3 times, and then earlier this year, like 3 or 4 months ago, I watched it again because I hadn't seen it in a while. And I had completely forgotten or just didn't catch it that the tall man was basically, that was like his succubus form, that he uses twice in there. But it's done strangely. So I guess you could probably miss it and not realize that this blonde chick is also, the tall man, and like what is essentially his seductive, succubus shape-shifting form.
It's his feminine side.
This might sound like a stretch, but on the subject of the female form of the tall man, I think the character name was the lady in Lavender. It reminded me as a kid. Well, let me tell you this. In all fairness, I didn't see Phantasm until it first came to television. So ever since I read Jaws as a kid in grade school, 1975. I read all my mom's horror and mystery books. So she had all these Alfred Hitchcock anthologies. When Stephen King first came out, she was the first person I ever knew that had Stephen King carry. And one novel I read again in grade school that my mom had was the hardcover first edition of Peter Straub's Ghost Story.
Wow.
To this day, all these years later, and again, this might sound like a stretch, but I swear, the lady in Lavender is a tall man. It reminded me of Ava Gowlie, if I remember that right, the character from Ghost Story, who is this vengeful spirit later named Alma, and she also takes these different forms. That always freaked me out, that the tall man was this chick that was seducing dudes and getting naked and shit. It was a weird. For one, forget the Ghost Story thing that I'm thinking of. That like thinking that way with my overactive horror kid imagination. Just in a script that's fucking weird, man.
Yeah.
But as we talk more about the movie, there's a lot of things about the movie that are out there. But that the way that opens, like you said, man, like they're getting hot and heavy in a cemetery. And boom, next thing you know, if you remember the kid Mike, he's running around, he's out in these woods. He's got a knife. He's in this mud pit where hands are coming up. He gets out of that. Yeah. He sees that chick, I'll tell you, as a horny kid in the 70s, early 80s, I was like, she might kill me, man. But you know what? I'd like to see her get naked. Anyway, go ahead.
I love movies, coming of age movies, where the parents are like completely absent.
Yes.
It Follows does that big time. Halloween. I mean, there are little bits of parents in Halloween, but just for a second, like The Sheriff. River's Edge is another one where the parents are essentially, for the most part, absent. I don't know what it is about that. I think it's because it's just something that allows the kids to like break the rules and be more. Parents aren't there to kind of get in the way of their adventure or to save them or anything. Yeah.
I swear to God, Chad, you and I are like I say this to John Bowden. I've said it for years. Like, we're like brothers from other mothers, man. Because, you and I recently via Facebook had a little exchange on River's Edge and stuff.
Yeah.
You said about these young people who are parentless, or if they have parents, they're out of the picture. That also connected with me. When I saw the movie, I was about 9 or 10. So I came from, my parents got divorced super early when I was young, like actually right around that year, right around 78, 79, which coincidentally is like when Halloween and Phantasm came out, respectively. And so my mom had custody of my younger sister and I. I've got one sibling, and she worked 2 jobs to pay all the bills and everything. And she was so poor, she couldn't afford a babysitter. We were really young kids. You're going to be home alone, and I expect you to, be responsible and whatever. And so I could relate to, like, my parents didn't die, but like the kid Mike was a little bit older than me in Phantasm. So watching everything he went through, I just could relate to, because when my mom wasn't around, I was out exploring and getting into stuff that like kids nowadays, would make the news or something. Local boy found putting friggin' quarters on the train tracks. Parents arrested for negligence. You know what I mean? Like, I was all over the place. So when I saw that kid Mike in Phantasm, I felt for him. Like, his parents weren't there. I didn't have an older brother, but I always had older friends or whatever, and I was always like Mike's older brother, Jody, I think is the character name, right? That whole thing clicked with me, and I also felt that terror, just everything, like Mike's observations on stuff. He sees the tall man carrying this casket under one arm or whatever and throwing it into the back of a hearse, and all this creepy shit going on. I'm like, holy shit. And before I forget, on topic, but something you said, Jeremiah, earlier, was that music gets ingrained with you. And I think in that window of time, Halloween 1978, Phantasm 79, the music in those 2 movies are unforgettable. And when I hear them, one, I love them. But when I was a kid, the music terrified me. The freaking music in Halloween terrified me. And I couldn't get it out of my head. And as a horror kid, I like being scared shitless and terrified. And that music's brilliant. And Phantasm, that music to me is brilliant. And it brings me right back to 79, 80 when I first saw the movie. Being a kid, that nostalgic lens of the 70s, the way the film looks and everything, it's just that's magical to me. Yeah, so the beginning of the movie, like we're talking about, you realize something's wrong. I mean, Morningside Cemetery, by the way, I thought was a brilliant name for the cemetery. It's a creepy name, Morningside Cemetery. And then, you get into the mortuary, and then the more you learn of what's going on, we're talking about how it was kind of out there that the tall man was turning into this succubus woman form to seduce guys to kill him. But the tall man was this mortician, that took the dead on Earth and transported them to this other world and made them these slaves, these little Jawa looking slaves. And that had a profound effect on me. Like years later, when Broken Hope did our 3rd album, the song we first ever did a music video for MTV was a song called Into the Necrosphere. And that was directly influenced by the movie Phantasm. And it's it wasn't about the tall man, but it drew that influence. And the lyrics I wrote were about this evil kind of mortician dude who had these otherworldly skills that when he did these crazy autopsies on these cadavers, he could enter this realm of the dead, which was like this on the other side. It was really crazy, but that was influenced by the tall man. So as a kid, I'm just thinking back when I first saw that movie, I'm like, what the hell's going on? This dude, like when you see Mike go through those 2 cylinder things that is the gateway, and he's like fucking flying through the air, and you see this red world and this miles long line of these little Jawa slaves, which are human corpses reduced to these slaves. It's like you're trying to get your head around that. What the hell is going on? And then Jody or Reggie, one of them grabs him by his belt, pulls him back out. Dude, I mean, like, I don't know, dude. Just thinking about it brings me back to when I saw it. There's no movie like Phantasm. One word, brilliant, man. Just brilliant. And I couldn't think of that shit.
The whole part about the mortician and the scariness of this. And I thought it was interesting when reading about the background. It was saying that Coscarelli had 2 starting points when he set to work on the script. And I'm quoting. First, he wanted to do something about the potential horrors that lay behind the closed doors of a funeral parlor. And I thought about that for a second. I said, that's dreadful. That's a scary
thing.
Did
that in an interview?
This may have been from IMDb. It's possible.
Oh, okay. That's cool as hell. I never, that's awesome.
And it said, most of us have no real idea what morticians actually do after all. They could be up to all sorts of diabolical shenanigans in those embalming rooms. And the second was a nightmare he had as a kid in which he was chased down in these endless white corridors by a flying silver ball equipped with a large needle. After that, and following a sort of dream logic, again, 2 years before David Lynch's Eraserhead, the script came together. So I thought it's interesting that he's invoking these childhood dreams and these childhood fears, but also when you were talking about grief, and like the way that stuff that was kind of going on at the time with you and the societal difficulties, right? That you're with the family and stuff. And in the film, I read somewhere, it was actually it was a video by Matt Draper on YouTube. And he cited a person by the name of Eric Orbe. I guess Orbe's dad was murdered when he was a kid. And so he was talking about the question about grief and about horror as a genre. And Dr. Stephen Moran's working at the Childhood Violent Trauma Center at Yale University. And he said this, when talking about grief and horror and things like that, that a lot of times it's therapeutic in the sense that you choose to watch these films. You can turn away, you can turn down the volume, you can experience the level of arousal, the somatic sense of fear, and know in the back of your mind that it's not forever. We're sometimes drawn compulsively to the very things that scare us as a method of mastering them. And I thought, that's profound. And I think that this movie, looking in hindsight, right, and this blending of dream and reality that's kind of a play and almost a mystery in a way, in part because they had to cut like 2 hours of, or 2.5 hours of footage, right? It was or an hour and a half. It was originally like 3 hours long.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So it was originally 3 hours long.
Yeah, like I think the theatrical cut's 90 minutes or something.
Yeah, they said that it was like 90 minutes because, and that's why, some people could complain and say, well, character development was shallow or this or that. And that's because 90 minutes was taken out of this film. But they were saying that there's a theory, right? A idea of the film that says that this is about dealing with grief and the loss of family, not just the parents, but the brother, and the potential that he's leaving and stuff like that. And did he really leave? Did he die? Like, all this stuff. And that it's really about the inner workings of facing the fear of loss and accepting it, and why he was the one to look inside the casket, for example, and to see that and to face that moment of accepting, and where the graves come up out of the ground and stuff. So that was for him dealing with grief. And it's almost like a poem in that regard about grief and about dealing with that as a young child.
I find it interesting too, that it was a 3-hour movie and they did do a test screen of it. Rated very poorly. Nobody liked it. So they cut an hour and a half, but mainly what they cut was character development. Yeah. And it was important to Coscarelli that he really wanted this relationship between the brothers, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that he never had an older brother that could like look out for him and teach him and stuff. So he kind of like almost lived vicariously through that when he was building with that relationship, and he liked the idea of having a big brother and being able to have somebody to rely on him. So for a horror film to get 90 minutes cut merely because they're trying to establish this relationship is kind of neat. I mean, I know essentially he wanted a horror film, and he wanted to make a horror film set in a mortuary because he thought they were creepy, but he didn't have much of a, basically he's like, I know I wanted to make a movie in a mortuary, but that's all I've got, and then of course, he brings his dreams into it stuff. I can't imagine the elevator pitch where it's like, because if you try to give an elevator pitch for the movie, you're just like, well, it's about this caretaker who can change into a succubus who sends out flying silver balls to kill people through the long halls of the mortuary. And if you cut his fingers off, they turn into flying insects and he bleeds baby food. And there's evil Jawas, and there's another dimension that looks like what maybe hell might look like. And that's why I love Phantasm. None of that makes any sense, man. It's beautiful.
When Mike at the end loses his brother, that terrified me, because I'm like, this kid's all alone. Sure, he's got Reggie, but he doesn't have that brother, and that, like, there's just a feeling of terror with that. And on a side note, when the tall man's fingers get chopped off and Mike brings one home and it turns into that fly, dude, that freaked the shit out of me today. Like, it's really true. Like, you remember, like, Phantasm has all these significant moments for me. When the tall man throws that casket into the back of that hearse, I'm terrified, because I hadn't even been to that many funerals at that time in my life, And I was in grade school, and I knew, I was like, well, I know that casket has to weigh a ton, and this guy's carrying it like it's a shoebox. I remember just that distinctly being an image. Then another one was when the tall man's walking down that sidewalk, and Reggie's opening the back of the ice cream truck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that, cold air is coming out, and the tall man turns and looks at Mike across the street, and then he does that thing like he's inhaling the cold air or whatever, and walks away. That stuck with me, dude. And that fly, actually, the other thing that actually scared me, man, was that fortune teller chick when he stick your hand in the black box and shit. Like, I can't get my hand like that. I just remember that freaked me out, and that friggin' fly just scared the hell out of me, dude. Like, they're going like this, like his older brother is like trying to fight. It's like how this fly is like stronger than anybody. And then I want to share this with you guys. When I saw that movie, so it was on TV, again, I didn't get to see it in the theater. I didn't get to see a lot of horror movies in the theater. I lived out in the country, so I was like 20 miles from the nearest town that had a theater, for one. Then I had a single mom who didn't have a lot of time or money to take me to a movie. Though my mom bought me Fangoria magazine and Famous Monsters of Filmland, and I could watch horror movies at home, she wasn't always big on, like, we're going to go see a movie? What's it rated? R? Oh, fuck. You're not going to watch a rated R movie. You're in 5th grade or 6th grade, whatever. So I'd have to wait for shit to come on TV. And when that movie came on TV, it was on late at night. It was on at like 10 o'clock at night. It was like today, a Friday night right now, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember it because the weekend was coming. And that particular night, I remember my mom came from a family of 10 kids. So she had a number of my aunts and uncles came over to hang out, and then they partied and all. They passed out in the house. So I had aunts and uncles sleeping in the living room, and I'm like, I'm watching this movie Phantasm. I saw the commercials, on TV. Mm-hmm. This is going to be on Channel 7 at 10 p.m. Woo, I'm like, yeah. And I already knew about Phantasm because of Fangoria magazine. Because my mom would buy me every issue since the first issue. Mm-hmm. I was lucky that way. It was pretty cool. So I'm like, yeah, this movie, I got to see this. Man, I watched it, and everything that happened had me on the edge of the seat. Like, oh my God, the tall man terrified me. The little Jawa dead people terrified me. The balls in the mortuary, all that shit terrified me. And man, dude, he gets to the end. Reggie's downstairs. I'm going to take care of you, Mike. Jody's gone, blah, blah. He's playing the acoustic guitar. Go pack your stuff. And then that mirror and the tall man, and, you know, boy, when the fucking hands came through the mirror and it went to the crack and that music kicked in.
Yeah.
That was the scariest I've been, not only in the whole movie. The whole movie had me scared. That was like the ultimate blade of fear went right through my heart. I was so freaking terrified. I think I audibly went, ah! None of my aunts and uncles who were passed out woke up. And by this time, it's like almost midnight or whatever, you know. I'm the only one awake. Pitch black house out in the middle of nowhere, central Wisconsin. I'll never forget that feeling. It's funny how fear can be near and dear to your heart. Because I love that. When I think about it, I think about it fondly. But I was freaking so terrified, man.
If I would have seen this as a kid, I don't know how long it would take for me to begin even looking in mirrors. Like, or to be in a room with my back turned to a mirror.
I'm like 9 going on 10 years old when I saw that. I didn't want to be alone at night when my mom would go to work or go see her boyfriend, and I was alone. Well, my sister was there, but my sister was never into horror, so she wasn't terrified like me. Because I'd lay in bed at night thinking, friggin' Michael Myers could be roaming around outside in the woods, in the country, and the tall man, like Jeremiah said, could be in my friggin' mirror.
You mentioned the fortune teller, the medium, or whatever she was.
Yeah.
In about a half a mile from my house, maybe more like a mile, there was in the 70s, there was a road, because I lived out in the country too, and you turn around this road, there's really no houses around, and there was like this one house kind of back in the trees, but near the road was this giant stone palm that was out by the street. It was just like this big palm statue. There was a palm reader that lived there. Now, I never went in there, but it was just always this, you know, iconic thing that locals, you know, we would drive by on the way to the grocery store and see that and be like, man, what's going on in there?
Yeah.
Doing black magic in there or what? What's going on in there? But it was kind of creepy, man. It had, like,
dude. Big time.
Yeah, so when I saw that dude walk up to that house back off the road with the hand on the sign, that made me think of that. But that scene, I take very little issue with anything in Phantasm, but there were a couple of things that it probably didn't bother me back then, but bothered me on repeat returns to the film. And that was, like, you know, when he goes into the thing and he's talking to that old lady. Well, she's not really talking, but she's kind of talking through the blonde chick. Mm-hmm. And they're, you know, having him do this hand in the box thing to teach him some kind of lesson about not fearing anything. And I just thought it's things like that in movies where every time when a movie asks you to basically look inside yourself, and you know it's foreshadowing for the end, and that there's gonna be redemption, and it's gonna be some soul searching, and it's just I find that so cheesy. And so when he did this, it's like, don't fear. And then I think at the end, twice he like heard the voice, you know, it's like, don't fear. Yeah. And then it would get him out of the mud, and it got him out of another situation. And I just thought, I don't know, that's just, I love everything about that, everything about the movie, with the exception of like probably that. The whole, like, I read
somewhere, I saw a video, a guy and a girl talking about this, and they said that was something actually taken from Dune. There's a similar situation. Isn't the phrase "fear is the mind killer"?
Fear is the mind killer. Yes.
Yeah, and this one was "fear is the killer."
This is fear is the killer. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was kind of
and they use a box to put your hand in it.
Yeah.
I think it's been a while, but I think they use a box where you put your hand in it too.
I got something too I wanted to run by you guys. If you're like me, I have an overactive imagination. When I see movies, like I'll see a character that the character might be short-lived. Like I'll start thinking, wow, what's their backstory? You know, what are they all about? So if you guys remember, I'm sure Jeremiah, especially because you're fresh off seeing the movie, and Chad, you've seen the movie enough times. and it's a memorable scene. There's like friggin' mortuary custodian, dude.
Yeah.
Like Mike's running away from shit that the ball, and this guy comes out and grabs him. What's his backstory, man? Like, is he in cahoots with the tall man? Have they been together for centuries? Because remember, Mike sees that picture of the tall man in that shop, like he's been around forever.
Yeah. Which was awesome, I thought. That was one of my favorite parts, man.
But then he's got Mike, he's real evil looking, and like he's gonna. He doesn't ask Mike nothing. Like, what are you doing in here, kid? But he just grabs. But the ball hits him and drills his friggin' brain. Which, by the way, that's another memorable scene as a kid.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Flying balls with blades that have drills and the blood's coming out the back. Plus, when the dude hits the ground, Mike's in a corner looking at him, and then the piss comes out.
Yeah.
They said that scene with the silver ball that originally warranted an X rating.
No, not the scene.
Shit.
The piss. Just the piss.
Oh, the urine did.
Just the piss.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know this.
Yeah, that gave it. Yeah, they originally warranted an X rating for it.
Wow.
And they talked him into like not the ball, but the fact that the dude pissed his pants.
I would say that because it lists the guy as a caretaker, but I would say that the backstory is in the edits on the cutting room floor. The problem is that the tall man in the original doesn't even come in until almost halfway through the film. And so I don't know how much they would have the caretaker. I mean, maybe he's in there more, but it does seem kind of random, like he's a guy that shows up and he's a scary dude and he's obviously in cahoots. He's not a complete rando. I mean, that would be real bizarre if it's just like a guy who's also there, bringing flowers, and he sees a kid and decides to just go crazy and grab him and choke him and then die. So, I mean, obviously there's a backstory with that guy.
I didn't think about it then, but I revisited it recently too, this last week, knowing I was going to be on your show. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what the hell's the story on this guy?
Yeah. I was thinking that same thing, and I noticed something when they very first show this caretaker / custodian. He looks like a normal guy, but when they show him right before the ball, his eyes are all blue. Looks like he's got eyeshadow all over. I don't know if you noticed that, but then
I noticed there's like makeup on the dude's face.
Yeah. Good point, Jeremiah. I think that the answer is probably on the cutting room floor. I've watched the first 4 Phantasms in the last few months. And I'd never seen part 3 or 4. And then in part 4, I don't know if you guys, Jeremiah, you haven't seen it. I don't know if you've seen it, Jeremy, but there's a ton of footage from the original Phantasm that was never used in part 4.
Is one of those called Ravager?
That's 5. I haven't seen that.
Okay, that's one I haven't seen either.
I own it, but I haven't seen it yet. Part of me hates the idea that there are sequels just because they try to answer some of the questions that weren't answered in the original, and I like the fact that they weren't answered. But part of me also likes to revisit, Reggie, that character. It just became so iconic, especially like in later films. But they almost tried to, especially with like around part 3, they really he started to feel like Ash from Evil Dead, but more from like Army of Darkness, where he's got one-liners.
There's I saw somebody ask the question over at thatwasabitmental.com about why are there so many unanswered questions, and I loved the answer to it, and it plays into your idea about should they have done sequels and things like that and wrapped it up. I like what he said. He said the answer, it would appear, is quote, because this is Phantasm, shut up. And it's one I'm perfectly happy with, actually. And I would kind of be down with that. I want to watch. I personally would like to watch the rest of them now. But at the same time, there's part of me that agrees with thatwasabitmental.com. I kind of like that there's all these, that it's just crazy. What you're watching is this wild ride, and there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions, right? And you just accept it and experience it in the moment, and then walk away with this a feeling from it.
Before I went into the preparing for the podcast too, I went to a couple Phantasm fan sites, and whatever the last installment was before Angus Scrimm passed away, there were fans that were really sentimental, saying how the very last, I don't know if it Chad, if you know, is 5 the last one, or is there any?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 5, I guess, has like a lot of the original cast, and they're obviously older, and that fans were like, I teared up seeing the original cast because they're portrayed as they should be now, aged, and they've come together for this final thing or whatever. So, like when I read that, I'm like, shit, man, I need to watch all these in a row and see that last one.
That'd be cool too, because when they decided to do a sequel, which was like what, 10 years later, when they did that, the people who pumped the money into it didn't want the original characters, and they even made him pick between 2 different characters that were pretty central to it, and he had to pick one of the 2. He couldn't have all of them.
No kidding, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, it was funny because a lot of the people in the film, the original one, I learned that the people at the funeral were relatives of the cast because they had hardly any money to deal with.
Right.
And so they just said, well, bring your family and stuff. And so those are actual like family members in that. And then they have, I always thought that it was dwarves or some kind of a little person inside of the Jawas, right? Although it's not fair to say that, because this came out, they were recording this stuff and had already written it up more than a year and a half before people were really aware of anything to do with Star Wars. And so it's one of those things. But they were actually the kids of the writer's neighbor.
Okay, yeah.
Because they didn't have money again. So they're like, well, hey, your kids work out for this. Those are actual children, which is really funny because there's a scene where the kid jumps on the back and they're spinning around, and the scene like you guys were talking about with the fly on the head, and he's whipping it around going down the stairs. There were no stunt people in this. They couldn't pay stunt people. And I remember a scene, I'm trying to remember which one it was, but I was like, my initial thought was, well, that's obviously a stunt person. I mean, there's no way that they would have them do that. Oh no, those kids, the people in that film did everything because they just didn't have the loot to do this. And so I thought that was a really cool thing.
Also, man, it was the 70s. There's like a meme out there I always see of this kid on an ancient 1970s friggin' bike, like jumping out of
off a ramp,
like 10 feet in the air.
We used to.
The kids flying down the stairs being filmed. There's no OSHA. There's no stunt crew. What happened to little Janet? Well, we filmed. She went right through the drywall, hit a 2x4, but she'll be okay. She'll be awake in an hour and ready for dinner. So no worries.
It made for good film.
I remember. I remember. Instead of being seatbelted, I remember all the time, man, being in the back seat, but leaning over the front seat like this, right in the middle. No seatbelt, or laying in the back where like the speakers are in the back of the car, laying in the little like thing right there, just chilling out.
My dad and all his friends, all they ever drove were Ford F-150 pickup trucks. I go see, again, my parents were divorced. I go see my dad on the weekend. Him and 2 of his buddies would get up front. My dad's got 2 kids, and the 2 buddies in the front seat, who are also single dads, all their kids and us, we're all in the bed of the pickup truck, flying around down country roads from one bar to another.
Yeah, it's accident.
Here I am today, thankfully. Man, just crazy shit, dude. I always say this nowadays, not to sound like old man Wagner, but I was a 70s kid, born in 1970. When I look back, there's a quality in seeing a 70s film, whether it's Halloween, The Omen, The Exorcist, Phantasm, on and on. There's not just a level of fear that those movies have. I mean, like, they're soberingly terrifying. They're really done. There's just a reason why they're classic horror movies. But also the music and the way it's done and everything is like, it brings you back. And I can remember being a kid. Yeah. Sorry about the arm in the way. It's my wife.
Oh, that's no problem.
Hi.
But I didn't know that about the kids being used. I did know that the film was done on a $300,000 budget at the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it was a mishmash of amateur actors and actresses and locals.
Yeah, the cantina is a real cantina. And it was funny because I watched a review where they were joking about how the set for the bar was really terrible and how it was really cheap. And I'm like, then I found out that's not a set. That's like a real bar. It's like a real cantina. And the thing is that the owner of that was willing to allow them to do that so long as he's in it. And that's the guy. That's the guy dressed that way. That's the
awesome.
real owner of that actual cantina. And so just another kind of cool factor. And what it came out with, what, 11 million or something like that. So it was like 300,000 to make, and they made 11 million. So I mean, it was a success.
Mike, the kid, he was what, 12 in the 12, 13 he was supposed to be in the movie. And he's a perfect testament for a 70s kid. I mean, he was riding a motorcycle, he was driving that sweet car, he was drinking beer, he had shotgun shells in his bedroom, and then when you get done driving it, you're working on it. You're underneath the hood. 13 years old.
Did you see how that bugger was the safety precautions on that thing? There's like one jack. I said, oh boy. Well, he's 13 years old, and then it basically crushes him, but then he very easily comes out. Yeah, that scared me, man, actually, because that's one of those things, like, you know, you mentioned Jaws, Jeremy. You mentioned that earlier. Yeah. Jaws, I said this on another episode, man. Jaws, just the whole concept, it has always terrified me. It's had a long-lasting impact on me, even in wanting to swim in oceans and stuff like that.
Jeremiah has never seen Jaws.
I've never seen the entire thing the whole way through because I got so scared watching the clips that I saw. My friends would have it playing, you know. Yeah. Wow. It's true, man. It's true. And now I could go back now and watch it. But see, here's the thing: psychologically, get this, man. Yeah. Just seeing that as a kid, right? And like you, when you saw that as a kid, and you saw certain scenes that really were unsettling and messed you up, you know, and you're like, whoa, I don't know about mirrors and stuff. With Jaws, I am a veteran of the United States Navy, right? And when I signed in, I was going to be a crypto tech interpreter. My idea was, well, I'll be stateside. I'll be on land most of the time. You know, that's what I wanted in the Navy. And then they said, well, you know, 9/11 happened. I was signing in, and they said, the billets are all filled up. We're not taking any more CTIs. What would be your second pick? And I had to think about that, man, because I'm like, all right, now I'm dealing with ocean. Okay. And I said, I'm going to submarines. And I said, because if I'm going down, dude, I'm dead. I'm done. Like, but if I'm on an aircraft carrier and that bugger gets hit, I'm floating on top of that water, and Jaws is going through my mind. And I'm like, no. So that's why I picked, I'm not even kidding, man. That is really why I picked submarines, I was like, Jaws, bro, no way.
But submarines didn't scare you at all? Like the movies you see where the sub power goes out and you're on the bottom of the ocean floor and you can't.
No, you're a goner by that point.
Would you rather die of claustrophobia and lack of oxygen than being out in open water with sharks?
Well, my logic, as I said, man, my logic was rooted in childhood fears. It was not at all like this logical thing that's like, well, here's my reason.
I've got a friend of mine who's terrified of flying. Terrified. He has to drink 4 double Jack and Cokes and, and then pop a pill on top of that shit to get on an airplane. And we've done vacations together where he's like, say we went to Maui once. He lives in LA. So his logic is, I feel much more calm about this flight because we're going over water. I go, well, why? Well, if we crash in water. I'm like, dude, that airplane hits the water at 700 miles an hour. Yeah. It's going to obliterate. You're going to be ripped to pieces and atomized. And he just can't get his head around that. He's like, no, man, it's water. It's like, dude, it ain't a cushy landing, man. It's physics. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I brought all that up because I was saying the car scene, dude. The car scene, when that happened and the car, boom, comes down. And by the way, that car is dope. That is, that's like one.
That car is badass, dude.
What is it called? The not Barracuda, Hemacuda. Anyway, it's just, yeah, I forget what it's called, its specific name, but man, that is just like one of the greatest cars of any movie, man. I absolutely loved it. But when that car fell on him, that's another one of those fears, man, that I've always had since I was a kid. I had a friend who actually lost his dad that way. And my dad was into cars, and so he's always under there, and I'm always biting nails looking at it, saying, I don't know about that, Dad. And he's like, it's, you know, I got like 12 jacks. What's going to happen? You know, but, you know, when I saw that, I said, if I was a kid like you, and I would have seen that, the car scene would have actually been one of those scenes that would have really freaked me out. And every time I would have gone out to the garage with my dad, I'd be like thinking, have you not seen Phantasm, bro? You might not want to be a mechanic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Speaking of physics, it was hilarious. And Jeremiah, when we briefly talked the other day about Phantasm after you had first seen it, you had brought this up too. It's so funny that when they pull Mike out of the other world, and he's like, I know what they're doing. It's like they're slaves. And the reason, the science behind what they're doing was so hilarious. And he said, he's got to crush them because of the gravity and heat.
He just knew it, man. He sees in there, he goes through a portal to another dimension, you know, and I like that people talked about the frequency concept. And, you know, so I heard an analysis about this that was saying during the day and age, you know, like the dawning of Aquarius and the fifth dimension folks, and that really tripped out song and stuff. But that there were people who we're talking about frequencies, and that there's multiple dimensions, and that it's based on different frequencies and everything. And there was a scene that I didn't understand. Why would they show the tuner, right? The tuning fork, and show that for so long? They focused on that. And then
when Reggie's jamming on with what's his name, Jody.
Yeah.
Fork, remember that?
Yeah. And Chad, you said that was like a song.
They wrote that song. Yeah.
It's amazing. They're actually fantastic musicians.
I love
the frequency idea. It's almost like if you had a multiverse model and the hologram model kind of smushed together and fused with a lot of LSD 25, right? And said, this is what you get. I thought that was a fascinating thing. But for him to go through this portal and see those little guys and be like, and then come out and have this answer like so quick, dude, and there was no questioning. It was just like, yes, oh man, that's nuts.
I'll share this with you guys. This is just off Wikipedia, but I thought this is really great. I made a note of this earlier. There's this journalist from the Austin Chronicle named Mark Savlov, and he said, dreams and surrealism are an important part of Phantasm. And this journalist compares Phantasm to the works of Alejandro Jodorowsky, Dune, there you go, and Louis Buñuel in terms of weirdness.
Yeah.
Journalist Savlov describes the film as an existentialist horror and a truly bizarre mix of outlandish horror, cheapo gore, and psychological mind games that purposely blur the line between waking and dreaming. Gina McIntyre of the LA Times describes the film as surreal and idiosyncratic. Muir writes that Phantasm purposely inhabits the half-understood sphere of dreams. It takes place in the imagination of a disturbed boy.
I like that you used the word that the review you cited used the word idiosyncratic, because that's exactly the word I used when I first saw it. I said, this movie is idiosyncratic. It's in a league of its own. It'd be hard, you know, the comparisons, right, to the other directors. Actually, there's a couple movies by them that I've wanted to see and is on my list. One that looks really bizarre. It's a kid in a general's outfit and it's real taboo. You know, but the description, you can see the comparisons with that. But this is in my opinion, this is really, really unique. Like it states, it's a blending of dream state and waking state. Time references are all weird, you know, like, did this happen? Did this not happen? You know, and I mean, what other movie has a guy in this vintage ice cream truck, this bald ponytailed ice cream truck driver that's playing very quietly Three Blind Mice as he's driving at night? Like, so he's not like shutting it off. It's just playing all the time, You know, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, that's his jam. He doesn't have a radio. He's like, oh no, this is good. This is good. This is good beat. You know, like what's going on?
Definitely one of a kind. It's like the Jane's Addiction of horror movies.
To both your points, there's no movie I like it. That's what makes Phantasm extra special and why it sticks out to this day. Nothing can touch it. It stands alone, man. It's just, that's special.
I would love to, you know, some of these intellectual properties like Friday the 13th and I think the Nightmare on Elm Street, they have like books, like novelizations, not just of the film, but things that branch off and have their own stories that they have like ghost writers or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I would love to write a book in that world.
Coscarelli's mom wrote a book about it. There were only 500 copies in the whole world, though.
About it, or using that word, like a fictional book using that world.
Using that world, I believe. Let me see.
Wow.
Book. Don's mother, best-selling author Kate Coscarelli, wrote a novel adaptation based on the script. It was published in a limited edition in 2002. Only 500 copies were produced. You can read the first 9 chapters online, and I've got the link. We can share it on our social media.
Awesome.
Yeah,
so it is a novelization of the original.
I like to see that. Yeah.
I bet that's worth money. 500 of them. I wonder if it's shrunken down because of gravity. So Jeremiah, our 5-star system rating here.
Yeah.
What do you give? Overall thoughts on Phantasm?
See, here's the thing, is that for enjoyability, like 5.5 stars, like more than what we have, right? The enjoyability factor, it was just so much fun to watch and so bizarre to watch the experience of it. It leaves you really wanting and needing, in fact, to watch it again. As you know, in a film, if I were to try to do like what Bob Pastorella was talking about, to say it's in a specific genre, the only problem is it's like a genre of its own. I mean, it's like this, it's this remarkable thing. But because there are a couple parts in there, because of the scene with the caretaker, right? And that's I think an issue. Okay. And that they didn't really build on, that there are certain questions left unanswered that could have, and maybe even should have been answered. I mean, I'm okay with, dangling chads, right? I'm okay with this kind of a thing because I like David Lynch and he does that all the time. He leaves unanswered questions and mysteries and stuff. But this one there were some that just were too random because of the editing and they had to cut it down. Okay. So it's a consequence of that. So it's not entirely a bad thing. And I would have loved to have been able to see the full thing. But also because there's a scene in there where the music, I mentioned earlier that I love the music. And I think it's maybe one of the best songs of any movie like that. I think it's just perfect. But there's the scene where he's like, "You're good, boy." That really iconic scene. But when he grabs the young guy and drags him outside, they're playing that song, like you were saying, that it's kind of the same song and it just has different parts. And I said, that scene it's almost as if that song had a bridge that was a little bit more lighthearted than the rest of the song. And that bridge is what was played during that scene, and it didn't fit. I felt that the attitude of the scene and the attitude of the song did not blend, and it was the only time. So I'm going to give it a 4.8. Okay, I'm going to give it a 4.8. I think it's an awesome film. It's iconic, idiosyncratic. It's scary, right? Kids, I can imagine, are terrified. I would advise, though, for any viewers that are concerned about parental stuff, there is nudity in it, and a couple places. In fact, IMDb lists only one, but there's two. The very opening scene involves some, and at the 20, I think it's around the 20-minute mark, 19 or 20 minutes. And so I would just caution about that. But 4.8, happily.
What about yourself, Jeremy?
I'd like to give it a 5, but I know this from revisiting it recently, and I understand it's low budget. There's continuity issues with a couple of things. Like, I don't let shit ruin stuff, but man, in this day and age, it's funny because with IMDb, you can see goofs and continuity issues. And I mean, look, Jaws. I love Jaws so much. I'm such a big fan. And I just found out over the weekend that if you guys, well, Jeremiah doesn't count because he's the one person on planet Earth who has drawn it. Just kidding, bro. But there's the scene with the rowboat guy in the pond where he's yelling over, "Hey, you guys are right over there," and Jaws tips the boat over, and then you see the leg go down to the bottom. And when the rowboat rolls over and the guy flies out, he's not wearing shoes.
Oh,
yeah.
So there's some continuity things. That's the only thing keeping me from giving it a perfect score, because I love, even though it was low budget and a lot of newbies were in the cast, they all did a great job. I mean, the story, everything we're talking about, there's no movie like it. The originality, and then the music, the soundtrack, the fear, the terror, everything about it is 5.5. It's the continuity. Like Mike, the kid, there's a scene where he's wearing blue jeans, and then he opens the door, goes out of, I can't remember if it's a car or a house. His pants are brown, not blue. And like the tall man, the finger scene that we all know where it turns into a fly. Yeah. When he slams the door, the tall man's fingers aren't chopped in the door. So I know I saw real anal retentive and like, wow, dude, you're a real stickler for shit. You're a freaking bummer. But just little things like that is the only thing keeping me. So like Jeremiah, I would say 4.8. It's that close to being a 5. Phantasm fans, understand I love the movie. Don't hate me because I didn't go all the way and I'm a stickler for shit. But it's the only thing keeping it from being completely perfect. Dude, it's like if you read a novel and either there's a continuity problem that somehow got published, like a character was a brunette and then was a blonde later, or there's a shitload of typos, the disbelief is suspended when that shit sticks out. Then you know what I mean? It's like it gets in your head. So that's the only thing keeping me from giving it a 5 out of 5. But I gotta be clear, it's one of my favorite horror movies. Yeah. It was in my top 3 to talk about on your show today, and I love it. It still holds up to this day. That's my 2 cents.
I wanted to say something before we get Chad's rating. You mentioned suspended disbelief, right? And you also mentioned that it has a lot of newbie actors and stuff. I was amazed at how easy it was to believe that they were like real brothers, and that chemistry amongst the cast was pretty remarkable. I mean, even the scene where they're playing guitar together, like you can tell there was a camaraderie there. And that you could sense it was very easy to get lost in the movie and to forget that these are actors playing a part, because they were doing so well at the chemistry, not only with their own character and with the story and with the tempo and the mood and everything else, but with each other. And so that's a huge kudos to the cast. I mean, that's especially because they are newbies. They're not, standouts and stuff.
The casting is brilliant. Angus Scrimm, the tall man, that will forever be one of the great legendary horror film villains, in my opinion. So therefore, that casting, genius.
Mm-hmm. What would you rate this as, Chad?
Chad, where are you at?
Yeah, first of all, it's one of my favorite horror movies for sure. Just such originality. The nostalgia and the little boy in me or whatever gives it like a 5 for sure, just because it's something that I can look past all of the issues that I might have with it and just enjoy it for years to come, just as like this feel good thing, whether it's on in the background or I put on before I take a nap or something like that. It's just something that puts a smile on my face. But as a true like overall rating, I do recognize some of the flaws that it has, not necessarily in like the acting or anything like that, because I did really love the characters, but mainly in some of the I mentioned my biggest problem earlier was the cheesy like look within yourself, don't be afraid thing. But there was one other issue that I had with it. There was essentially this like Scooby-Doo, let's catch the bad guy trap that they had set. It felt very much like Scooby-Doo,
Yeah.
Like they rigged up this thing where have him chase, just like they do in Scooby-Doo, have him chase, into this trap, and then somebody else is going to be somewhere else, pushing boulders to finish the trap off. And it was just it felt a little anticlimactic, I guess, for me. And because this guy was so, it's like, wow, who is this tall man? This weird, alien dude or whatever. And then he goes out like that.
If it wasn't for you rascally kids,
Yes.
Yeah.
The meddling kids, yeah. And so I'm with you guys, a 4.8. But again, just for something that's like feel good nostalgia, just for me personally, on a different level, I can easily have it be a 5. It'll always be one of my favorite movies. Yeah. But it's also a movie where it's not like where if somebody says, hey, I'm looking for great horror movies to watch on Shudder tonight. If they're like 25 years old, I'm not going to be like, you got to watch Phantasm, because they might not like it.
Right.
You might have to be a little older and to be able to at least, like Jeremiah, taste a little bit of that 70s, Otherwise, if you're in your 20s or something, like I watched it with, I think it was like a year or two ago. My youngest son right now is 15. I think he was 13 at the time, and he kind of laughed a little bit through it. He thought it was kind of cheesy. So it's not something that I would recommend toward. But if somebody my age and they're like, oh, I've never seen that, I'd be like, oh, dude, you gotta watch it.
It's funny you mentioned Scooby-Doo Trap. I never thought of it like that, but the way you just explained that immediately made Scooby-Doo is like my favorite cartoon, one of them of all time to this day. The original Scooby-Doo, one of the best known villains, one of my favorites, was a guy called the Creeper. And if you think about the Creeper, it's kind of funny because the Creeper is kind of like the tall man, just this big, huge guy, hair, the face, But I really like your assessment, Chad.
Yeah.
Before we go, Chad, did you walk away with any sagacious illumination for us, man?
Well, after watching Phantasm, I'm really grateful for both the level of gravity and heat that we have here on planet Earth, because if the heat and the gravity were any different, we'd all be a bunch of 3-foot slaves.
Yeah.
This close to wearing robes on Mars, man.
Yeah. What about you, Jeremy? Something that changed you and made you really consider your life and how you might want to live it from here on out?
Yeah, man. If I was ever getting it on like Donkey Kong at midnight in a cemetery, and I was looking up at this beautiful maiden, and she all of a sudden transformed into the tall man, I would close my eyes really hard, and I would click my ruby red slippers and beg to go home, because I'm in the wrong date, and this is not going well. And so, that's my moral lesson, man. That's exactly what I took away from this. All things considered.
So, Jeremy, Jeremy, what is it? /Wagner.com? Is that your website?
It's Jeremy-Wagner.com.
Yeah. Okay.
And Facebook, I think, is like Jeremy Wagner Official or something. Or I should know, but I think that's right.
I'll put it as a banner at the bottom of the screen, and that way it's there for the video for everybody. But man, it's been really a pleasure, man, and it's been funny. And I'll tell you, man, I got to say this. Other than that, you've shamed me into having to watch Jaws. It's one of these things now I simply have to do. I'm a big boy now, okay, Jeremy? I can do this. But,
Jeremiah, my only wish is I wish I could have been with you when you saw Phantasm for the first time, and I wish I could be with you when you see Jaws for the first time, just to see your reaction. But watch the whole thing, damn it.
Believe me, I will now. And I'll give you credit, man. I'll post about it and talk about my experience and stuff. I think it'd make for a really good video. But I'm so glad.
That'd be great.
That you came on, man, and I'm excited to read your book. I'm really excited to read it. When I loved, as I said earlier, I loved watching the interviews with you talking about it, and to become familiar.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. If Chad has my email address, so Chad, if you would give it to him, Send me a note, Jeremiah, and I'll send you a care package of books.
Oh, yes, you are the man.
All right.
Yeah, man. For
By the
sure.
way, I didn't know you were in the Navy. Thank you for your service.
Oh, yes, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. So,
And other than that, you guys, Jeremiah and Chad, really great being a guest on your show. It means a lot to me. This is fantastic. I had a lot of fun. Chad,
Yeah, man.
you and I haven't really connected this way before, so it was a real pleasure to talk to you and
For sure.
about one of our favorite horror movies and all that, man. And I can't thank you guys enough. This has really been a blast.
Yeah. You were the first people that I thought of. I thought and I even thought as like, he's probably not going to want to talk about The Thing or Jaws.
You're absolutely right.
But I'm so glad that you chose Phantasm. When I saw that on your list, I was like, I didn't know if I had to talk Jeremiah into doing that one or not. But I was like, I mean, I liked them all, but I was like, I really want to do that one.
And that's the one I wanted. I was like, well, dude, I'm like, yeah, man. I watched the preview and I was like, dude, Phantasm. I even tweeted, I messaged that to him. I think that was just one word, Phantasm. Like we are doing this. So
when Chad confirmed that we were going to talk about Phantasm, I made a point to revisit the movie and dig up some other facts. Again, how the cast was pulled together. Again, those journalist quotes, that type of thing. Yeah. So I wanted to come armed with it fresh and throw that out there. So to that end, I also thank you, Chad, for choosing Phantasm because it was really awesome to revisit it again, man. And and having this discussion with you guys, like, kind of floored me in a way to realize how brilliant this movie is on so many levels and how it stands the test of time today, all these years later. So
sounds good. Well, thank you so much, man. Yeah. And thank you everybody for tuning in. And make sure to check us out on social media. You can find us, of course, on Facebook and on YouTube and on Twitter and Instagram. And you can do that by following Paleo Cheese, PALEOCHEEZE. Same thing with our Gmail, paleocheese@gmail.com. And of course, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. We've been saying iTunes, it's Apple Podcasts. And Google Play and Spotify and Acast and all of that stuff. And make sure to check out other podcasts at projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? My name is Duncan, and I'm the host of the podcast, Hash Time with Duncan. On this show, I tackle all the biggest sports stories between the hashes and beyond. If it's a big story, I'm going to talk about it and give you my opinion on it. Subscribe to my show wherever you get your podcast. All you have to do, search Hash Time with Duncan. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Hash Time with D. Peace.